Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, may I have your attention, please? Are you ready to engage in a mind-blowing experience and hear talks about life, technology, entertainment, and business? The next episode of HIPTHER Talks starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi everyone, Zoltan here from HIPTHER Talks. We are back again. Today we are talking about a different subject. It's mixed martial arts, MMA, and I have with me today Sanjay Thakur, CEO and CTO at Verdict MMA. Hi Sanjay, nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to give a shout out to Lloyd Danzig for the introduction because Lloyd is an awesome guy. He always has all these connections with every industry. So Sanjay, just to get started, just have a few words about yourself and your career, your experience.
Yeah, sure. I'm a software engineer by trade. I sort of got into Verdict MMA by accident. It was sort of a side project that we started as a friends group in high school. And all of our talents sort of combined into making this. And for me, I really just love startups and company that's a unicorn in the US. And I grew it from a $300 million company to 1 billion, being the mobile engineering lead. And in the past, I've always thought about joining larger companies, but right now it's a big opportunity in the MMA space and in betting in general. And so seeing the opportunity here, it kind of crosses with the passion that I love. There's no way that we can let this opportunity go. So really doubling down on this and creating Verdict, it's a great opportunity. And so combining all those, that's how we got to where we are.
Yes, you basically need to be a software engineer and a great idea to have such an awesome platform. So could you tell us more about Verdict MMA?
Yeah, I started off in 2013. We were together during a fight night. It was Johnny Hendricks versus GSP. Us three founders were all Canadian, and we're huge GSP fans, George St. Pierre. And that night, the fight actually went to a decision. And when it came to a decision, we actually all thought that GSP lost. So we were curious what other people thought around the planet. And we thought it was kind of crazy that we couldn't have a collective voice and kind of see an average of what everybody thinks. And so we decided to create Verdict. And we sent out a push notification after every single round. And then we would add up the score for that round. And then we would present it to people. And then at the end, you could tally that and you could see that total score. And people loved that. And that combined with the picks component and the fantasy component that we released recently, people have really been digging that. In November 2018, that was our hard launch with just picks and scores. And we grew rapidly with a zero marketing budget. And as time went on, we saw the growth of the iGaming market and DFS in general. I know in Europe, it's been pretty developed, and in the UK. In America, it was going from like gray market to white market and things being a lot more defined over here. And so seeing that growth gave us enough courage to be like, there's a lot of demand here. And so we'd be kicking ourselves if we didn't convert our product into something that was more paid. And so that's what we did. We saw our game, we took our picks component and we made it into a DFS game that was a lot more compelling than what we saw out there. And from that point forward, we kind of just went forward and got investment from a ton of people, and that's how we got to where we are.
All right, that's a great story. So could you tell us more about Verdict MMA in a nutshell? Maybe how the platform works, how people can engage, what's the actual way of doing things on the platform?
Yeah. I guess I'll give a brief primer for how MMA works, and that'll give a lot more context. So in MMA, it's a very natural sport, right? There's two people that face off in combat, and I always say, like, in any timeline, in any universe, MMA would always exist. There'd be two people fighting. I'm not sure if baseball would exist in every single timeline. And so that's what makes it so compelling for us. And inside of MMA, there's typically multiple rounds, and each round is scored by a group of 3 judges. And those judges give each round a 10-9 or a 10-10, depending on who won the round. And then at the end, they add that all up, and you get a score. And there's 3 ways to win a fight. There's a decision, which is when it comes to the end, and the judges have to come out with their scores, and you determine who wins. There's a knockout or a submission, and usually when it goes to decision, sometimes there'd be controversial decisions because, like, judges would be either not passionate about sport, paying attention, or people would be like, why did they score a particular way? There would be no insight. And so that's where we sort of came in with providing that insight by aggregating scores from people all over the world. And we also added a picks component to engage people before fight night. So
Okay.
yeah, with the scores, people really engaged during the fights, but during fight week, people really wanted to express who they were a fan of and who they kind of vibed with. And so the picks component really showed that. And so you could tell your friend, I'm picking this, and with that picks component, we gamified it and created a leaderboard. And so we had a global leaderboard where all your picks would be added up in some particular way to create a leaderboard that you'd be ranked on. And so there would be a global leaderboard, and there would be a leaderboard between you and your friends,
Okay,
similar
wow.
to different fantasy sports. And how you placed on that leaderboard would actually give you experience, and based on that experience, you would go from like white belt all the way to black. And so we're
Oh,
really
wow.
thinking about we're really thinking about how to like give people more like credentials. Like how do we make it so that somebody who's like really passionate about the sport, it really shows on their profile. And so now we have like a ton of black belts. I think it's something like 3% of people on our platform are black belts. It takes roughly like over 2 years to become a black belt on the platform. Yeah, not as long as it takes in real life, but it's interesting because then we can take all those black belts and we can say, how did they score the fight? Because
Okay.
those guys are clearly fans. And then now that we're getting into KYC and things like that, we can actually tell like who are bots and who aren't bots, and then we could actually get like a pretty cool, very accurate score for any particular fight.
All right. And are there any prizes in this leaderboard?
Not at the moment. So we actually just released our fantasy game 3 months ago, our daily fantasy sports game. So you can actually play for real money now. So it's the same model that we
Yeah.
took. We saw that people really enjoyed it, and we created tournaments. So before it was a global leaderboard, it was like everybody, but now there's different tournaments of different sizes. So we've created a featured tournament that has usually around 200 to 1,000 people that join in. And we also have one thing that we're really trying to zero in on is heads to head. So the cool thing about that, the sport of MMA is really head to head. And so creating a DFS game that's head to head is very aligned with the ethos of MMA. And eventually we'll have things like records against you and like your best friend, and you can see like who's winning most of the fights, or sorry, most of the contests between you two. And we'll kind of have seasons based on that too. And that's stuff that we're excited to make in the future.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, many have tried and failed with this type of platforms, including myself, because in 2012, 2013, we had a platform called tipleaders.com, which was actually a platform which has allowed people to start placing virtual bets on soccer game, tennis games. And then there was a letterboard, like you said, and we would give maybe 100 euros per month for the first ranked players. And yeah, this was a model that got copied, and there were a company that copied this algorithm and everything. So they got investment and they went all the way ahead of us. So that's why we quit. But yeah, like I told you, many have tried and failed, and I'm really happy for you guys for this platform because it sounds really awesome. All right, so I'm not a huge fan, like I told you, of mixed martial arts. I mean, not a fan. Like I don't watch it, I don't follow it, but I heard of it. But maybe some of our audience are like me, and maybe they would like to get an info, maybe a quick wrap around the history of betting on mixed martial arts. Where did it start? Was it on the streets, maybe street fight? And is there something that maybe like in Mortal Kombat that the final round is like death to the fight to the death and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I guess you can't really go into the history of betting in MMA without talking about the history of MMA, right? As you're
Yeah,
mentioning.
exactly.
Yeah, and I guess there's always been some sort of like combat in the world, like you're saying, like backyard fighting is still a thing, and
High
it sort
school
of
fights.
right, high school fights. That's how everybody gets in circles. Yeah, it's like Dana White has a quote around that where it's like if there's a baseball game and there's a fight breaks out, right? Everyone's going to be crowded around that fight, right? And that's what makes MMA so compelling. But at the same time, it's like, how do you make it so that it's professional in some sort of sense? And so really that happened over time as the sport was regulated. They got rid of things like small joint manipulation, things like fish hooks, things like kneeing people when they're down, and really made it well-rounded, because at the end of the day, you really want a fighter's career to be as long as possible. That longevity and the fandom between a fan and a fighter is really what keeps the sport going. Those characters, that's really what keeps you coming back every single week. And in MMA, there's a ton of them because you have different weight classes as well. And so not all fighters will be fighting other fighters. And so it sort of started off in 2001, where the Fertitta brothers bought the UFC. And that was around UFC 29, I believe. And at that time, there wasn't really a lot of sports betting in MMA, but the Fertitta brothers were actually from Las Vegas. And so you can see the synergy there start to happen. And I believe somebody from Mandalay Bay decided to post some odds on fights in the UFC. And so that's how it sort of started. They saw an opportunity that people would be interested in actually placing bets on these fights. And so, yeah, Mandalay Bay took advantage of that. And over time, the UFC grew. Their advertising partners grew over time as well. And you kind of saw them go from, alcohols and snacks and things like that to like what they have today, which is absolutely massive. But continuing down their journey, like they bought other promotions like Pride and Strikeforce, and eventually they were purchased by Endeavor. And then that kind of takes us through the 2010s as the sport continued to grow and really explode. If you think about MMA, it's a very young sport comparatively. Yeah, like 2001 is just like right around the corner, right? Like it's very recent. And then in the last few years you had things like the pandemic, which the only shop open in town was the UFC and mixed martial arts. They actually were the first ones to open right out of the gate after all the closures. And they also had Fight Island going all the way to like Abu Dhabi to host these fights. And back then it was a very controversial decision, but right now people look back at that and see it as a genius move. So taking that in of how calculated these guys are. It's not easy to have a promotion running like that, but coming to today, it used to be a very gray market. It's getting much more solidified, and especially in Canada and Ontario, where there's actually an iGaming association that comes out with licensing now. DraftKings has a massive deal with the UFC for $350 million over 5 years, which is absolutely massive and speaks to how big the demographic actually is. The cross between MMA and sports betting, and it's come very far.
Okay, and it's going further.
Right. Sports betting in general is growing really rapidly as well. And MMA is no different. I think it's like 13% year over year. And 70 million people bet on sports. And I believe 60% actually bet on sports and also do fantasy sports. And so we work with an association called the FSGA, Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association. And they do a study every year. And that's we've sort of been looking at their data in order to determine our business decisions. So there's been like a lot of just great stats coming out of them.
All right, awesome. So why did you pick MMA?
Yeah, it's interesting because even as we went out there and were raising money, a lot of people were like, "Why not boxing?" And
Yeah.
why don't you guys throw like a
Cricket.
right, like a real time kind of like cricket component, right, or basketball component, and it really has to do with our friendship. Us three co-founders, myself, Mandeep, and David. When we were young, we actually watched MMA together, like almost every time there was one in Mandeep's basement, and we love the sport. We're really passionate about it. As a kid, my dad put me into Taekwondo at a young age, and I think I was being like, I was being like a brat or something. He's just like, I'm gonna put you in Taekwondo, and I was there for over a decade, and I got my black belt. But it really gives you a great appreciation for the sport. And I remember after after doing Taekwondo and seeing Anderson Silva, he's a superstar in the MMA world, seeing him and being able to follow his movements, it really it really like got me like excited to watch him fight next time. And then GSP was around as well, and him as a Canadian character, it's great to watch the two progress in their careers. And so it really comes down to that. It's really a passionate fan base, a passionate community. It's very underserved as well. There's no niche operator in the MMA space. When you look at other sports books or fantasy providers, they take the same approach to MMA that they do to like football or American football. They take that same system and they apply it to MMA. But a lot of people aren't interested in talking about MMA in that sort of way. We're not interested in talking about things like the most significant strikes thrown or the most takedown attempts. People talk about that, but we're more interested in talking about things like who won and how they won, or who you think's going to win and how you think they're going to win. Right? You always see like people like Conor McGregor. There's going to be a second round knockout. Like that's the terminology that they use. And so the game that we developed was based on that terminology, and so it really resonates with the community a lot better that way.
Right. So yeah, Conor McGregor is actually he's a huge fighter. Everyone, I'm sure everybody heard of it. I think we're the same age, around 36, 37, 38. Yeah. So you most probably have lived also the era of WCW, the wrestling and everything. So I'm really. It's very interesting to see that did not go into the gaming space. So they are not bets on wrestling and WrestleMania and stuff like that. So yeah, and mixed martial arts went into it. So yeah, could you tell us more about your company? And in terms that I'm curious about the fact that you guys only do B2B products or just only B2C?
Yeah, it's a good question because we ask ourselves that a lot. We do have a huge B2C product. The fantasy component is all B2C, but we also have B2B. We work with the PFL in the past and Invicta, and we also have a partnership with Stake at the moment. And so it's kind of a balancing act right now. We really want to bring more value to the B2C portion because we really see ourselves as customers as well. Okay. We're really making something that we want to make and what we want to play. And so then we get out there and we talk to other people and we also ask them, hey, is this something kind of that you guys would want to play, or are we just like, really missing the mark here? But with fantasy, we did that and we made something we wanted to play, something we saw that our friends would want to play. We have a pretty big circle of friends here that come to watch the UFC every time it's on. And we've asked them like, what kind of game would they want to play? And that's what we kind of followed off of. And that's where we see the opportunity really in terms of having this, the unit economics being correct for this DFS game and continuing to make it better through small optimizations, making it easier to get your payments in, making it easier to play, giving you more insight into how you've made your picks. All that are things that we're optimizing and really making into a smooth process now. And so and we also have a media component. So of course, being fans of the sport, we believe that journalism in MMA needs to be done in a specific way. And so that's also something that we're doubling down on. and we're really looking at how we can kind of bring more exciting news to all the users. And so it's really a combination of all that, and really the B2C excites us more. If you want a summary, I know I rambled, but the B2C really does excite us more.
So yeah, so it's mostly focusing on B2C rather than B2B, which is great.
Right.
All right. So yeah, in terms of the community that you guys have built, are all mostly fight fans, or are they also focusing on other sports, or how does the fight fans community look like?
I think it's a very wide range. You have a wide range of people. You have people who are in it just for, the sake of combat and the blood, and then you have the people who are very technical and also in it just to see the technical aspects of like what kind of game is somebody going to come out with, and we lean towards that side. And when there is ground game, the technical people will be like very excited to like kind of watch that and see what happens. But of course, there's that crowd that wants to just see like a brawl, and so it's a huge mix of people. It really is, and that's what makes it, I think, very exciting. But going back to the community, yeah, it is a community that's a very niche community. It's our demographic is just people who just love MMA,
Okay.
typically between the age of 18 to 35, and that's what's kind of interesting too. 2001, that demographic might have been 18, but you can kind of see like what kind of age they are right now. And as time goes on, that 18 to 35 demographic is going to grow.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
right. And so a new 18 to 35 demographic is going to kind of come in. And that's what causes sports to, I guess, blow up really big, because the other sports, they have people who are interested in the sport all the way up till 65. And MMA just doesn't have that yet, but it is going to have that. And so that's what we're also betting on. That's what's also causing it to grow so rapidly. That along with the global access. But yeah, we have a Discord community now. And before we had picks and we had scoring, but when you went to the app, there wasn't really a voice. There wasn't really other people that you could converse with. And so that's what things like MMA Twitter are. People on Twitter just making memes, and fighters just getting their press, and it's great to witness. But we really think there could be so much more, and the Discord kind of proves that. Our Discord has like a group of like intelligent people. Again, it's a range. It's like people who really know the game really well, who drop memes, and then sometimes you have obviously people who are there just for some company during fight night. And I think that's really what's missing, because sometimes you have people who have that friends group, and it's really fun to watch fights with a friends group. But then you have some people who are like siloed, who love watching the fights, watching themselves, but would love to find other people who are also interested in the sport. And so that's where the Discord comes in. And that's also where we want to take some of the social components in the app. We want to sort of make it easier to converse with people, to kind of see how people have made picks. The betting in of itself is very social too. If you've watched like Twitter, and a lot of personalities really grow up in the social sphere just based off their picks. And seeing that blow up in the last 1 to 2 years, because the markets are becoming white now, and like people like Stake are giving sponsorship money to people to be able to show their picks. It's very interesting to see where it's going, and I don't think it's anywhere near its sort of end manifestation. It's getting there. It's going to be something nuts. But we're not anywhere close.
Yeah, how about human interaction? I'm curious. Do you guys also have some maybe gatherings with the community, or like you mentioned that you have some friends that you watch the UFC? Maybe do you have some stories about your community getting together, watching a fight or something?
Yeah. Well, we have a friends group that does get together, and it's like a lot of guys. It's like 12 to 20 guys at any point. But being able to watch it with more people would be really cool. The only other experience that we've had is really going to the fights themselves in the past. But actually, Zoltan, to be honest, every single fight night, we have to sort of man the control panel now.
Oh, yeah.
So we're sending out the push notifications. We're monitoring to make sure, our system isn't like overloaded or has too much load on it. And so during fight nights, we're actually just working these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's looking at a screen and watching the fights, and then between the fights, we'll be doing a lot of that monitoring and the social work. And so we haven't really had the opportunity to go out, but we really do want to get to that point, like where we can automate a lot of this and then get out there. But I think a lot of people do. Just speaking to other people in the community, they would love to have a feature like that where it's like, how can I find? I know UFC had like a bar finder. You could find like bars that have fights, but we don't want to make anything like that right now just yet because something like that takes a lot of thought to make properly. Yeah, and we really want to do our due diligence when we make that because there's obviously the safety concerns of the community, and we want to be very careful before approaching something like that.
Yeah, maybe somebody will get in a bar fight with a black belt from your community. So
yeah, I think something that's interesting about the crowd is once you watch MMA and you're training yourself, you really realize that the one thing that you learn with training that everybody learns is that you don't want to fight anybody. Like that's really what you learn. Actually, getting my black belt over time, people always tell me it's like, could you like I don't know, like, do you think you could fight somebody? And it's like, I think what I learned was walking away and not getting in that situation is probably your best bet, because I've sparred with other black belts who do not look like they can fight, but their acumen, they're just like their precision, their psyche when they're in a fight is so clear that most people do not operate like that, and that's what makes fighters very different from everyday people.
Yeah, it's all about the discipline and learning to control yourself, not just using the techniques that you learn to fight. Right. So yeah, happy to hear this, and just want to also ask you about the near and far future of Verdict MMA. What are your plans? Maybe expanding to Europe or doing some other expansions?
Yeah, something we're really deep in right now is expanding our DFS product. It's very regulated in the US, so every single state there's a different process you have to go through in order to get licensed there. And then right now we're looking at the UK specifically to open up. It's a huge population, something like 35 million people just in the UK alone, and so there's a huge fight culture over there as well. Yeah, fans over there are like bred completely different than people in America, and they're because like the fights over there are going on at like 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. and I've heard of apps where people will actually sign up for a phone call when it's like 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. to wake up to watch a fight, and I'm like, is that app successful? And the person was like, yeah, it's pretty successful, and I'm like, wow, it's just like I think about like my friends waking up at 6 a.m. or it's like we'd rather watch a recording, right? And so it just speaks to how big of fans they are over there. But to get back to your question, in the near term, enhancing our offering for DFS, so really polishing it out, making sure our unit economics make sense. We don't want to just create something based on hype. We want to make sure our metrics actually make sense, people are enjoying it, and we have stats that back that up. We want to make our app much more social. So being able to engage with your friend, being able to converse in the app, maybe that's something we want to explore. And then our media arm as well. We want to make it so that we have like not a crazy amount of media that comes out, but more like bespoke articles. We really take a lot of, we look at other role models like The Athletic as people who make bespoke articles, and we really want to provide that for fighters rather than something that's like surface level with a few sort of cookie cutter questions. It'll be something that like digs into fighters' backgrounds, and so really looking forward to that in the near term. And then the far term, we're really looking at making a pretty good blend of product and community. That's really like the end game. How can we make it so that people are engaging with MMA and specifically the fighters, and at the same time we're growing that community. And Chris Grove, one of our advisors, kind of said it the best. He said there doesn't have to be just a few big operators in the space in terms of sports betting. There can be niche operators that will operate on every single vector. And I think that's what's happening slowly, because at the end of the day, people usually aren't a fan of like, sports, and put that in quotes.
Yeah, exactly.
They're a fan of like a sport.
Yeah, exactly.
You do have the phenoms who are like, they just love everything, but I think that's very rare. Like usually if you talk to a friend, they're like, I really love the NBA, or I really love football, or what have you. And so that, I think, is going to be how things sort of move. But right now it's just convenient. You can kind of raise a lot more money if you say we operate across the board.
Yeah,
And
and it also
yeah.
brings a lot of innovation in being able to focus only on one vertical.
Exactly. And so like our game was able to target our sport a lot better rather than the salary model. That does work pretty well for other sports. And another thing in the FAR is the one target that we really go for is in the future, if you're in the MMA space, you kind of associate that with Verdict as an automatic second screen experience of like, if I watch MMA, I have Verdict. That's really what we're going for. And how do we provide the utility, like fighter information that people need in order for us to get there?
It's awesome. And my friend, you have been a fan of MMA and now are working in the sphere. Like, you cannot enjoy a fight anymore. That's because you're actually in the in the industry of it. So yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, but we still enjoy the fights thoroughly.
Yeah.
Like we watch the fights together, us three, every single time, and we still enjoy it thoroughly. So it's and we do love making this, and so it's kind of like picking what you love in a sea of things that are pretty good. So it's not too bad.
Thank you so much for this, and hope our audience enjoyed it. Maybe if you'd like to say some parting words from the audience.
Yeah, sure. We love what we do. Any sort of feedback, you can kind of message us on any platform or support channels, and we'll take a look. We really do pride ourselves in being user focused and user led, and so when it does come to user feedback, it goes straight to us.
That's good. That's good to hear. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and get notified about recent updates and new episodes. So this has been Sanjay Thakur. Thank you so much for joining, and see you soon.
Thank you, Zoltan.
Thank you for joining. Be sure to check back next week for the next HIPTHER Talks and subscribe on Amazon Music, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Pandora.